Hera strides the immaculate halls of Home 1, entering an all-too-familiar room featuring a hollow table in the center. On the far side stand a handful of holographic figures whom Hera greets hastily, apologizing for her lateness. One of the senators remarks that she's not the only one who's kept them waiting, and Hera notices that Senator Organa isn't there. Mothma smiles leisurely and says she's sure Leia will arrive shortly. Another senator says he's eager to begin and suggests that Organa be filled in later. He motions for Hera to begin her report. The motion is seconded, and Mothma relents, telling Hera to begin. Hera starts filling them in on any and all recent signs of activity from Imperial remnants and how they're being dealt with. But partway through, she's interrupted by the sudden appearance of Leia. Mothma greets her, saying how fortunate it is that she could make it, but Leia politely explains that this isn't a time for pleasantries. She just received an urgent communication that a New Republic prisoner transport was attacked, and she needs Hera to look into it at once. The other senators agree. Leia rattles off the location and designation of the transport, and Hera sets out immediately. Upon reaching her ship, she charges Chopper to take Jacen aboard Home 1 and keep him out of trouble until she can get back. Jacen asks where she's going and why he can't come. Hera explains that she's going to take care of something very important and that it's too dangerous for Jacen to come with her. She tells him to listen to Chopper and keep out of people's way before planting a kiss atop his head and shooing him off the ship. As Hera gears her vessel into motion, the scene cuts to AHSOKA aboard her T6 shuttle. She sits back in the pilot's seat, tasking the ship's autopilot with returning her to Osis. She gets up and wanders about the shuttle with a look of quiet contemplation on her face. The silence permeates every corner of her vessel, stretching on endlessly. Ahsoka's seemingly directionless roaming eventually brings her to the training room. As she leans against the doorframe, we hear a memory of Sabine begin to play in the background before transitioning fully into the flashback. A young Sabine strains to lift a small object with the Force, but despite her best efforts, the object only shudders slightly. Sabine releases her concentration with a groan. Ahsoka tells her to relax, promising that she'll get it eventually, but her words do nothing to soothe Sabine's frustration. Her student angrily reminds her that she's been trying for years and yet hasn't improved her aptitude for consciously using the Force. Ahsoka seems concerned by Sabine's increasing anger but says nothing, and Sabine demands to know what it will really take. A beeping sound breaks the silence and jolts Ahsoka out of her memory, informing her that someone is attempting to contact her. She moves toward the sound, reaching the large holotable on board her ship and activating it. A hologram of Hera springs into view, and Ahsoka reacts with evident displeasure. She quickly starts to explain that she tried speaking to Sabine, but Hera cuts her off, explaining that's not why she's contacting Ahsoka and strongly recommending that she forward to Luke the message that she's about to give. We cut from Ahsoka's perturbed reaction to the New Republic prisoner transport drifting through space, surrounded by 3 other New Republic vessels. We jump to inside, where Ahsoka is examining the body of Captain Hale. Hera stands beside her, holding a holographic device in her hand displaying a holo of Leia. Ahsoka somberly agrees with their assumed cause of death. It was a lightsaber. Luke races in then, saying he got there as fast as he could. His eyes immediately fall on the brutalized body of Hale, and his shock is evident. He starts to say something about the appearance of the wounds, but Ahsoka confirms his suspicions before he can even finish voicing them. As Luke reels from the news, Leia asks who could have done this, saying she thought that the Sith had perished along with Vader and Palpatine. Hera suggests the Inquisitors, but Luke answers that Ahsoka and himself had hunted down the last of them years ago, and that there was nothing to suggest any remained. At least, Ahsoka points out, not until now. Luke asks if the transport security recordings held any answers as to who could have done this, but Leia explains that they were destroyed. Ahsoka notices Hera's gaze is pinned to the floor, though she says nothing in the moment. Luke asks with obvious dread if anyone survived. Hera lifts her gaze and answers no. Everyone on board was slaughtered, including the prisoners. A pained quiet passes between the 4 of them, followed by an unspoken question. With no clues to follow, what are they to do? Hera's gaze returns to the floor, with Ahsoka again taking note of the odd behavior. She decides to break the silence, voicing the hope that they'll soon gain some clarity and may the Force guide them. Leia orders Hera to pass on instructions to have the vessel scoured one last time before promptly ending the communication. AHSOKA takes the opportunity to ask for a private moment with Hera. The look Hera gives is that of a deer caught in headlights, but she obliges. Once they are out of earshot of Luke, AHSOKA states rather than asks that Hera has something to share. Hera confesses that not all the security recordings were destroyed, that she has one in her possession, but was afraid to mention it given it contained an unsanctioned interrogation of Morgan Elsbeth by Sabine, and she knew the level of scrutiny it would garner in light of the circumstances would inevitably cost Sabine her position and possibly Hera's own position as well. AHSOKA is unsettled but understanding. Hera voices the concern that if the killer learned of the forwarded security recordings, then they would most likely come after both her and Sabine, that the killer may be after them already. A light of panic appears in AHSOKA's eyes and she gestures Luke over, explaining to him that they have a lead. Luke responds immediately that they should tell Leia, but Hera stops him, saying the situation is complicated. AHSOKA explains that they have reason to believe the killer may come after Hera and Sabine, and that right now they need to find Sabine and make sure she's safe. Luke's expression makes it clear that he disapproves of keeping this news a secret, but he agrees to come along and help. Hera shouts Leia's orders to the Republic personnel present on the ship, vaguely explaining that she has other avenues to explore and that she'll return as soon as she can. AHSOKA suggests it might be better if she stay behind, but Hera flatly refuses. Luke asks where Sabine would be, and AHSOKA answers Lothal. We cut to a wide shot of familiar landscape. Then we see Baylan standing not far from the entrance of the cave we were shown in the last episode, a communicator in his hand. He activates it, and we cut to Shin aboard her ship as she hears the answering beep of her comms. After a moment of grim-faced hesitation, she responds. Baylan begins by telling her he is nearing success in his circumvention of the gate's defenses. He then asks her to report on her own mission. Shin says Morgan is dead, but Baylan clearly senses that something is wrong. He presses Shin further on the matter and she soon cracks, explaining that Morgan anticipated their betrayal and shared the clue to the gate's whereabouts. That information is now in the hands of 2 Republic officials, if not more, Shin worries. Baylan assures her that this is not her failure and asks for her location so they can regroup. Shin is quick to protest, assuring him that she can handle it, and that disarming the gate's defenses is more important. Baylan appears reluctant but agrees to let her handle it. They terminate the call and the shot widens on Shin, showing her ship gliding high over the prairies of Lothal. We cut to a wider shot showing the planet as a whole, just before AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke's starships drop out of hyperspace. They begin their descent immediately, Hera's voice sounding over the comms shortly after they enter the atmosphere. She suggests they split up in the hopes of finding Sabine more quickly, but Luke protests, reminding her that the killer slaughtered the entire crew of a transport and shouldn't be underestimated. AHSOKA agrees, pointing out that they'd only been assuming so far that the culprit is one person, that there could in fact be more. Hera relents, and silence settles over them briefly before it is broken by AHSOKA asking if she can have a private word with Hera. Hera agrees, taking a few seconds to switch to a closed frequency before giving AHSOKA the go-ahead to speak. AHSOKA asks why Sabine was interrogating Morgan when she and Hera had both agreed that it'd be better to keep Morgan's claims between the two of them. Hera insists she never told Sabine anything, but Sabine is clever and guesses that Morgan might know something about Thrawn given their strong affiliation in the past. AHSOKA utters a sigh, agreeing that yes, Sabine is clever, but she doesn't always act that way. The shot widens on the 3 ships before cutting to their arrival at Sabine's home. AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke all head inside, Luke stopping just inside the door and keeping a sharp eye out while AHSOKA and Hera glance about the empty dwelling. It's clear that Sabine isn't there. AHSOKA notices a hollow device laid out in the open and points it out to Hera before reaching down to trigger it. The two watch with growing dread at the message that follows. The hollow recording of Sabine greets Hera with a note of sadness, saying she figured she'd come eventually. She explains that she's gone to bring Ezra home and might not be back for a while. As the message continues, the view pulls back through a nearby window, revealing Shin listening in from outside. We cut back to inside as Sabine starts to pass on a message to AHSOKA, only to stop short, giving a sudden angry shake of her head before terminating the recording. Hera appears horrified, but AHSOKA's face is a mask. She turns to Hera, saying it's time that Hera showed them the recording of Morgan's interrogation. We cut to Shin, seeing her hurry off screen. Then we jump to onboard the Ghost. As Hera cues up the recording from Hale, AHSOKA suddenly glances around, her expression making it clear that she sensed something. But as the interrogation recording begins, she turns her attention to that instead. She and Luke watch grim-faced as the scene unfolds, until Morgan mentions the planet where an intergalactic traveler supposedly dwells. AHSOKA pauses the recording, declaring that that's where Sabine would be headed. And with that, she strides briskly off the ship. Hera and Luke exchange a surprised look before Luke hurries off to his own ship. We see one by one the three of them hastily powering up their vessels. AHSOKA inputs the name of the planet into her ship computer, giving it a moment to calculate the exact coordinates before passing it on to Luke and Hera, who it appears had already begun the exact same process. Then they take off, rising into Lethal's sky. As they enter the cloud layer, we cut back to Hera, watching her navigate via her instruments. The view creeps up behind her, then we see Shin step into frame, revealing the fact that she had been hiding on board the entire time. Her lightsaber flares to life at Hera's throat, and she instructs the Twi'lek sharply to halt the ship. Hera does so, her fear evident in her face. Shin asks if she distributed the interrogation recordings to anyone else. Hera answers no, and Shin orders her to destroy the recording. We cut to AHSOKA, and it's clear from her expression that she can sense something is wrong. She glances at her scanner, noticing that the Ghost has stopped its ascent. She slows her climb, calling to Hera through the comms. We cut to Shin and Hera's panicked expressions. For a moment, neither of them moves. AHSOKA asks the Twi'lek if she's alright. Shin snaps at Hera to send her friend on her way, warning that if Hera tries anything at all, Shin will kill her instantly. Hera reaches a trembling hand to the comms, taking a second to compose herself before reminding AHSOKA that the Ghost is an old ship, adding that nowadays she never quite knew what sort of problem would be popping up next, but that one way or another she'd manage. A brief silence follows, then AHSOKA responds with an affirmative, telling Hera that the Force will be with her. As soon as the exchange ends, AHSOKA switches her comm to a closed frequency, contacting Luke and telling him that something is wrong. Luke admits he sensed as much himself. AHSOKA insists they can't slow down or turn back, or else the Ghost scanners will register it, and whoever is on board with Hera will know that the jig is up. Luke asks her what her plan is. AHSOKA quickly switches to autopilot, retrieving a half-mask respirator from a wall compartment before triggering the ship ramp to lower. She takes one last look at the glowing dot on her sensors indicating the Ghost, then tells Luke not to turn back his ship until she gives him the okay. Before Luke can protest, she races to the ramp and jumps off it, plummeting into the cloud layer below. Shin orders Hera again to destroy the security recording. Hera complies, Shin double-checking afterward to ensure there were no tricks. We snap back again to AHSOKA as she falls, squinting through the thick clouds all around her. The Ghost appears suddenly below her, and she quickly uses the Force to slow her fall, landing lightly atop it. She hurries to the closed hatch where the Phantom used to dock, opening it with a wave of her hand. At that moment, an alarm goes off on the control panel of the Ghost, and Shin demands to know what it is. Hera scrambles to check, but Shin is on edge. In a frenzied fury, she repeats her earlier threats, inching her lightsaber even closer to Hera's throat. Then AHSOKA's voice rings out from behind her. Shin whirls to face her, eyes wide, then raises her lightsaber to free Hera's head from her shoulders. AHSOKA force slams her backward, Hera leaping from her chair and racing to her friend's side. Shin lands sprawled across the control panel but shakes off the impact quickly. AHSOKA draws her lightsabers and charges, but rather than engaging, Shin slashes open the viewport with her saber and leaps out. AHSOKA catches up a second later and leans out into the open air, peering at the clouds below. Hera soon joins her, having retrieved her own onboard respirator. She snaps about the damage to her ship, but AHSOKA doesn't answer, choosing instead to activate the comms to tell Luke to get to their position as fast as possible. Hera reclaims the pilot seat, AHSOKA instructing her to take them below the cloud layer. Hera guns it, leaving AHSOKA clinging to the walls of the ship for support. They emerge from the clouds, AHSOKA's eyes sweeping the air for some sign of Shin, but there's nothing to be seen except the planet stretched out below them. Hera discards her breathing mask and levels out the ship as they approach the ground, turning the ghost in a wide circle and slowing her speed so as to increase their chances of spotting Shin in the sea of grass below. As she completes one circuit, AHSOKA, now free of her own mask, snaps at Hera to go around again, but their second sweep is just as fruitless as the first. AHSOKA slams her fist against the wall in frustration, and Hera lands her ship with an expression of silent defeat, Luke landing alongside them only a split second later. The view cuts to beneath the ghost as we see the ramp lowering. A blurry form shifts slightly in the forefront, but it can't be made out. Then we jump back to Hera and AHSOKA as they step out onto Lothal, Luke joining them shortly thereafter. Hera confesses that the recordings are gone, AHSOKA adding that so is Hera's attempted killer. A shocked and dismayed silence lingers over them. Then Hera turns a forlorn gaze on her ship, trying to force some humor into her voice as she remarks that she'll have to catch a ride with one of the others. AHSOKA places a comforting hand on her shoulder, offering an apology. Hera says it's only a ship, only for AHSOKA to point out that it was her home for many years. Hera says nothing, and AHSOKA suggests they come back and get it fixed up when this is all over, but for now they need to go help Sabine. Then she turns to Luke, asking for a ride up to her ship. Luke nods, though as they file onto his vessel and take off, the view lingers on the ghost, drifting back to its underside. We see Shin detach a grappling cable and drop to the ground, lifting her arm to reveal a wrist device built into her left gauntlet. She taps a sequence of keys after emerging from beneath the ghost, lifting her eyes to the horizon. A moment later, a small ship appears in the distance, approaching rapidly. It lands several meters from her position, and she hastily boards it, taking off and rising quickly into the atmosphere. We cut to Sabine on an overcast planet, making her way through a sparse little town with hardly a soul in sight. She stops whoever happens to pass her, receiving a series of dismissive answers to her singular question. One woman insists there is no intergalactic gate, and the man who said so was simply out of his mind. One man aggressively shrugs her off when Sabine tries to speak to him. Some see her coming and purposely turn away, cutting a wide arc around her and turning down a different course entirely. Sabine continues to wander, clearly at a loss. She spots a Syrian man leaning against a building, a drink in his hand, and moves over to him. He half-heartedly turns away, keeping his eyes on his drink. Sabine hesitates, but asks him the question anyway, begging for just a little help. The man suddenly turns back, staring at her for a silent moment before remarking that he knew the man she was speaking of. He was a friend, in fact, but he hadn't been seen in some time. The Syrian adds that Sabine isn't the first one to come asking after his friend, that in the beginning he had told anyone and everyone about his intergalactic gate. He had even traveled to other settlements on their thinly populated planet in the hopes of finding someone who would believe him, who would partner with him in his supposed exploration endeavors, though each time he would return in a state of defeat. He had always been unstable, but this strange new obsession had pushed him even further over the edge, leaving his claims to fall on deaf ears. But despite that, even in a galaxy so large, word had spread of the madman claiming to have found an intergalactic gate. Sabine asks the Syrian if his friend ever showed him where the gate was. He says he tried, but he'd turn back at some point since his indulgence toward his friend's obsession could only extend so far. The Syrian goes on to explain that after his friend's recent disappearance, he'd retraced their steps and discovered a cave in the area, though he'd only gone partway in. Sabine quickly asks to be shown the location of the cave, but the Syrian hesitates, saying there was something off-putting about that cave, something that just didn't feel right. He says there was something else strange too, but hesitates again before explaining what. Sabine presses him on the matter, and he relents, recounting how his friend came to him before his disappearance, saying that some strangers were coming to speak to him about his discovery, and it was likely they were going to agree to fund his research. But he'd been afraid, the Syrian says, worried that things might go sideways, so he'd given something to the Syrian for safekeeping. Sabine asks what it was. Once more, the Syrian hesitates. Then he seems to reach a decision, stating quietly that he'll show Sabine what it was and where the cave is located, but that afterward he wants nothing more to do with any of this. Sabine agrees. We cut to the inside of a humble-looking residence as Sabine enters with the Syrian. He strides across the room with clear purpose, rummaging through a haphazard pile of belongings stacked against the far wall before finally producing the target of his search. It's a worn holopad. He hands it to Sabine, explaining that his friend had supposedly started mapping the new galaxy he'd claimed to have found, and that the information was contained on the holopad. He'd never bothered looking at it. Sabine activates the holopad, and aside from some minor glitching, it works fine. The Syrian tells her she can keep it, and Sabine thanks him. Then he starts listing off directions on how to reach the cave he'd told her about, not so subtly edging her back toward the door as he does so. As soon as he finishes speaking, he pauses just long enough to ensure that Sabine understood the instructions, then quietly closes the door in her face. Sabine looks down at the beaten-up holopad in her hands and takes a deep breath before starting off. We cut to AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke arriving at the planet. AHSOKA pulls up some information on her ship's computer, Hera leaning over from the co-pilot seat to note the planet's sparse population. She suggests following any leads on the man Morgan spoke of, the one who claimed to have traveled beyond the known regions, since Sabine would doubtless have been following them herself. AHSOKA says that will take too long, and they don't know how far ahead that assassin might have gotten. She contacts Luke, telling him to wait on standby, then rises from her chair and quickly strides away. Hera asks her what she's planning, and AHSOKA answers that she's going to try sensing for Sabine. Hera says she'll have better luck from a much closer range. Reaching for the communications channel, she tells Luke what the plan is, and that she intends to help as much as she can by flying over any known settlements on the planet. Luke agrees, and Hera decisively claims the pilot seat as AHSOKA settles into a meditative position near the back of the cockpit. We cut to a distant shot of them dipping toward the planet just as another ship drops out of hyperspace. Shin has arrived, and her gaze is fixed on her enemy's ships, her expression one of frantic anger. She switches on her comms, calling for her master, trying to warn him that he might have some unwanted company incoming, but there's no response. Shin slams a fist down on her control board, releasing a frustrated half-scream. Then she quickly collects herself, reaching across the control board to flick a particular switch into the on position. From outside, we see her ship cloak itself. Then Shin fixes her gaze back on the two vessels just entering the planet's atmosphere, gearing her ship into motion and following in their wake. We jump to AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke sweeping over the planet's desolate hills. As they pass a single sprawling settlement, Hera asks AHSOKA if she senses anything. AHSOKA replies no. Hera's face grows tight, but she presses on, Luke following close by. Then, as they approach the next settlement, AHSOKA suddenly calls out, saying she's found Sabine. Hera excitedly asks where, and after a brief moment, AHSOKA tells her which direction to fly. We cut to Sabine standing at the edge of the cave, wherein the Infinity Gate is hidden, though as she stands gazing into it, she suddenly turns back, staring into the distance. We flash back to AHSOKA in her meditative state. Sabine hesitates a moment longer, then her expression hardens, and she turns and enters the cave. Jumping back to AHSOKA, we see her telling Hera that they're definitely on the right track. Meanwhile, in the cloaked ship behind them, we see Shin's expression growing increasingly frantic and angry. Finally, she seems to snap, decloaking and racing to close the distance between her ship and those of her enemies. Cutting to the interior of AHSOKA's ship, we watch the vessel jolt violently, Hera shouting that they're under fire. She calls to AHSOKA, but AHSOKA remains in a state of concentration, struggling to hold to the thread of Sabine's presence. The ship jolts again, and Hera screams that she can't stay the course. Luke's voice sounds over the comms as he volunteers to cover them. Then AHSOKA's eyes snap open, and she answers him, telling him that he needs to get to Sabine, that she and Hera will distract the assassin. Luke protests that he can't sense Sabine, but AHSOKA simply instructs him to stay on course before giving Hera a nod. Hera nods back and jumps straight into evasive maneuvers. Luke gears his ship into a higher speed, forging ahead of them. Shin notices, her eyes widening as she realizes their plan, but she focuses her attack on AHSOKA's ship, mercilessly battering it with fire. AHSOKA helps guide Hera through evading the onslaught, using the Force to anticipate Shin's aim, causing the assassin to quickly become frustrated. Meanwhile, Luke contacts AHSOKA's ship again, trying to explain that he still can't sense Sabine, only to suddenly stop short. His tone changes as he says he does sense something, or rather someone, but it's not Sabine. He spots a cave below and he declares his intention to land the ship and head into it, that he strongly suspects that that's where this presence he's sensing is located. AHSOKA looks worried, telling him to be careful. Then she turns her attention back to the fight at hand, still trying to assist Hera as much as she can, but Shin's attack has become increasingly, furiously desperate. They're taking more and more hits, and AHSOKA says the ship can't take much more. We cut to Luke, racing from his ship into the open maw of the cave, showing no hesitation as he plunges straight into its darkness with only the light of his Jedi weapon to guide his footing. Then we cut to a brief montage of Sabine working her way deeper and deeper into the underground tunnel, her surroundings gradually changing until they become the massive cavern wherein the pyramid stands. She stares at it in awe, making her way toward it, then inside it. As she spies the strange light ahead, she deactivates Ezra's lightsaber before approaching. Balin's dark silhouette cuts through the light. He seems to be operating on some sort of control panel. As he finishes, the light shifts, dimming down to patterned threads of light covering the floor of the chamber. Then, slowly, Balin turns to face Sabine. Sabine regards him with uncertainty, though Balin doesn't seem much fazed by her presence. He asks her who she is, and she replies that she could ask him the same thing. Balin gives his name, and Sabine asks him what he wants with the gate. Balin replies that he could ask her the same thing. Sabine answers shortly that she's here to use the gate. Balin asks her for what purpose, and Sabine insists that it's none of his concern. Balin says it is because the gate is under his control. He asks her what she's looking for, if it's a something or a someone. Sabine says nothing, but Balin seems to sense the answer, determining that it is, in fact, a someone. We cut back to AHSOKA and Hera still struggling to hold out against Shin, but their vessel is soon dealt a devastating blow, sending them crashing toward the surface. They land hard, leaving Hera's leg injured in the crash and AHSOKA feeling dazed. Shin immediately flies on ahead, determined to catch up with Luke. AHSOKA rushes to Hera's side, trying to help her to her feet, but Hera can barely walk. She urges AHSOKA to go on ahead, that if Sabine and Luke need her help, then she'll never get there in time with Hera slowing her down. AHSOKA hesitates briefly, then agrees, hurrying off the ship and toward the distant cave. Meanwhile, Sabine stares Balin down, demanding that he let her through the gate. Balin warns her not to force his hand, that he'd prefer not to needlessly waste a life. He says he senses that Sabine's grasp on the Force is weak, that with her power alone, she could never hope to defeat him. Then we hear Luke's voice, telling Balin that Sabine is not alone. Appearing from behind her, he races to Sabine's side, igniting his lightsaber. After a moment of surprise, Sabine quickly follows suit. Luke tells Balin that he doesn't wish to fight, that they can still resolve this peacefully. Balin admits that he'd likewise prefer not to fight, but that for anyone who stands in the way of his purpose, he is prepared to deal with them accordingly. Sabine asks him what he thinks he'll gain from helping Thrawn return. Balin answers that he has no interest in Thrawn, that he seeks a far greater power, one that will reforge the galaxy, reforge all galaxies according to his design. Luke says he can sense the darkness in Balin, and that he saw firsthand the devastation that his assassin had wrought. He says he can't even begin to fathom the horror that a universe according to his design would bring, that Balin must recognize the error of his actions. Balin answers darkly that for the greater good, some lives must be sacrificed. Then he ignites his lightsaber. Luke replies that Balin has left him no choice. Then, as one, he and Sabine race forward, clashing with Balin. Sabine manages to stay in the fight for those first few moments before Balin knocks her aside with a jarring backhand, rendering her unconscious. Luke alone is left to stand against him. Their duel is vicious and unrelenting. Balin proves himself a fair match, but as the fight presses on, the tide begins to turn against him. We see him start to struggle. Luke forces him back. Then with a lightning-fast blow, he sends Balin's weapon flying from his grip. Balin is defeated. He asks Luke what is to happen now. Luke says he will answer to the New Republic for his crimes. Balin says he thinks not. Suddenly, from behind Luke comes the flash of an orange-red lightsaber. It slashes him across the back, and his responding shout of pain echoes through the chamber. He crumples to the floor, out cold, just as the already unconscious Sabine begins to stir. She lifts her head, watching through bleary eyes as Shin Hati raises her lightsaber to finish Luke off. Then Balin shouts at her to stop, warning her that it is dishonorable to strike down a defeated foe. He further scolds her for striking from behind, saying that such an act is cowardly. Shin seems gutted by the criticism, hanging her head in shame. Then Balin returns to the control panel, ordering Shin to the gate. Sabine pushes herself upright, shouting for them to wait. Unclipping the holopad from her belt, she lifts it for them to see, asking how they intend to navigate an entirely new galaxy without the aid of a map. Shin immediately begins stalking toward her, telling Balin that she'll get the map. Balin stops her, saying there's no need for Shin to waste her energy since Sabine is not a threat. Sabine persists, claiming they can help each other. Balin seems to think it over before remarking to Shin that Sabine may in fact prove useful to them. Shin looks taken aback, but says nothing. Sabine stays where she is, demanding that Balin give his word that once she hands over the map, he'll allow her through the gate and that neither he nor his assassin will harm her. Balin considers it, then agrees. Sabine approaches, Shin eyeing her with unrestrained contempt, while Balin returns his attention to the control panel. Sabine stops to check on Luke, her expression full of concern. Then her head jerks up, reacting to something unseen, something outside the chamber. Balin finishes with the controls and the gate lights up blindingly. Then he outstretches a hand to Sabine, requesting the map. Sabine lays her hand on Luke's shoulder, almost reassuringly, then stands and slowly delivers the map to Balin, every step screaming of uncertainty. Balin joins his apprentice by the gate, pausing to look back at Sabine before stepping through, with Shin following immediately after. We cut to a close angle of AHSOKA racing toward the light, then spotting Luke and kneeling quickly by his side. After looking him over, she lifts her head to find Sabine standing at the gate threshold, staring back at her. Their eyes meet for a long moment. We see AHSOKA wordlessly pleading with her former Padawan. We see the unspoken struggle in Sabine's eyes. Then that inner struggle slowly melts away, and she steps through the gate, the light swallowing her whole. As soon as she's gone, the light grows impossibly brighter, then in a heartbeat, it winks out, leaving AHSOKA and Luke in total darkness. We cut from AHSOKA's perturbed reaction to the New Republic prisoner. Okay. She decides to break the silence. We cut to a wider shot showing the planet as a whole just before AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke's starships drop out. Okay. Luke's name threw me off. Just before AHSOKA, Hera, and Luke's why is that hard? Why did I make that hard to say? The shot widens on the three ships before cutting to their arrival on Sabine at AHSOKA switches her comms to a closed There's a D in there. But rather than engaging, Shin slashes open the viewport with her saber and why? Why am I having so much trouble with this? Only for AHSOKA to point out how it was My hand is getting tired of holding this mic. He says he tried, but he'd turn back at some point, says, since his indulgence. He strides across the room with clear purpose, rummaging. He hands it to Sabine's. The one who claimed to have traveled beyond the known regions, since Sabine would doubtless... Are you serious right now? Then AHSOKA's eyes snap open and she answers him, telling him. Meanwhile, okay. After a moment of surprise, okay. Sabine persists, claiming they can help. Balin finishes with the controls and the gate lights up blindingly. Why can't I say blindingly? We cut to a close angle of AHSOKA racing toward the light. Then enunciate. Okay, forget it. You know what? I'm moving on. Then spotting. Nope. I'm gonna do it again. And she steps through the gate.